Hey, yo, what is up, everybody? My name is Chandler Molyneux, and welcome into the Act First show, where we talk about sales and personal development. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about personal development. More specifically, I want to talk about anxiety today. There was a time in my life where anxiety was so bad that I thought I had schizophrenia. I thought I had bipolar disorder. And now these were not diagnoses from a doctor. These were all self-diagnoses because I was so anxious. But now I don't second guess. When I have anxiety, I don't question. I don't go down the rabbit hole. I don't second guess. I actually use it as a tool. I use it as a weapon. Maybe you've heard me say this before, but I actually think it's one of my superpowers. And I'm going to talk about that today because I believe we live in a very anxious world, right? We got politics. And before we even get into that, the reason I think the world is so anxious is because fear is being used as a weapon. Fear is being weaponized. Let's get into the political example, right? You have liberals who say that Trump is evil, Trump is Hitler. We should all, fear what he is going to do. And then we have conservatives that say Democrats are whack jobs. They're freaks. They're trying to destroy democracy, right? But both sides are weaponizing fear. Fear is used in advertisements, right? I was even having this conversation with my wife the other day, but when I was scrolling through Netflix, I personally like to watch things that inspire me. I like to personally watch things that are going to contribute to the goals and the lifestyle that I want to live. And when I go through Netflix and I try to find something that fits into that category, it's very hard to do. Most things on Netflix are about murder mysteries, murder documentaries. Most things are just dark and evil, right? And the reason is because it gets eyeballs, it gets attention, right? But when we live in that world that is driving fear, and with the Netflix, like I even see this a lot with, more specifically with females, but even myself now. I'm starting to catch myself do this, but when you watch and consume a lot of content that makes you fearful, you become very fearful in your day-to-day life. For example, I'll be walking down the street in Austin, Texas, and I'll see somebody walking towards me, and I'll be like, oh, that guy looks a little suspect. And then I'll have my guard up, and I'll be a little like freaked out. And then like literally the guy will walk by, and he's just like the nicest guy ever, right? And we lead with fear instead of leading with love. And I think that is a massive problem. And I think it is one of the bases of why we are so anxious as a culture. Okay, quickly, I want to get into my story. I won't spend too much time on this, but I do think it's really important to share this because it creates context. I'll talk about certain points that were pivotal, certain learning lessons. But really, I want to show that I've gone through this. I understand what you're feeling if you are very anxious, and they are real feelings. It is a real problem, and I feel very confident. I have 3 talking points after my story. I feel very confident that at least one of these 3 talking points is going to hit home for you and help you get through this anxious season in your life. Okay, let's get into it. So I would say my anxiety predates when I actually started feeling anxious, or at least recognizing it as anxiety. When I was really young, like I'm talking like elementary school, middle school, I would get in trouble a lot. And I think the reason I, lashed out and got in trouble, I was obviously seeking attention in some way. I was seeking validation in some way. Really, I think I did it because I wanted to be cool. I wanted to have friends. Because when I would do the things that got me in trouble and getting sent to the principal's office, I started hanging out with the popular kids. And I would do these things, and like I said, it helped me gain status. It helped me gain popularity. Well, as a result of me doing these things that got me in trouble, and literally I set the record for like most principal attendances in a year in my elementary school and in my middle school. Like they were really concerned, like send me off to a different school, kind of concerned. Should he be expelled? Kind of concerned. I was not a great kid. I was definitely a troublemaker. And one of the downfalls of that, there was many downfalls, but one of the downfalls of that is a lot of quote unquote normal people, because I hung out with the bad boys, right? I was one of the popular kids, but the normal people would tell me that I'm weird. They would tell me there's something wrong with me. They would tell me that I'm lucky if my life destiny is probably I'm going to be in jail, right? Like I would get told that over and over and over again, that you're weird. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. And when you get told that enough times as a kid, when you become a young adult, you really start to question yourself. So I would say right around the age of 18 is when I started feeling immense anxiety and really started questioning what is wrong with me. Because I would feel these feelings of anxiety. I would be so nervous to do things that once I was so confident to do. Like even just walking down the hallways of my high school, I was terrified, right? Speaking to somebody, a lot of it was social anxiety. Speaking to somebody, I'd be terrified. Going into the mall by myself to buy something, I was absolutely petrified. Like there were points in my anxiety journey where I would avoid things, like totally avoid things. There was even points where I wouldn't even leave the house. I was so crippled with anxiety. And my poor mother, she was my person that I would unload all of these anxious thoughts onto. But it started off like that. A lot of social anxiety, a lot of avoidance, a lot of questioning what is wrong with me. But then it started to get worse because I started to want to answer that question, what is wrong with me? And I started going down the WebMD rabbit hole, and I would, analyze all my symptoms, compare them with these other mental illnesses. And I started to self-diagnose myself with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, all the different, generalized anxiety disorder, this anxiety disorder, that anxiety disorder. And I started to self-diagnose myself because I thought if I just, figured out what was wrong with me, that would provide the relief. And isn't that funny? Like, what if somebody did tell me, yeah, you're bipolar? I bet you all my anxiety would have went away because I would have had an answer, right? That's something to think about, right? If you're questioning what's wrong with you, if you got the answer that you're looking for, would all your anxiety go away? Because if it would, then anxiety was your problem in the beginning, or your only problem at that. All right, so I started going down the WebMD rabbit hole. I wasn't satisfied with that. So I started taking myself to therapists. I started taking myself to psychologists or psychiatric psychologists. Psychologists, you know what I'm talking about. I was looking for psychiatric help, and I would go to one therapist, and I would talk about all my symptoms, and I would say, am I bipolar? Am I schizophrenic? Literally just all these dark and twisted and demented thoughts. I would unload those, and the therapist. Thank God, by the way, I'm going to get into this in a second, but thank God, we're going to get into predatory therapy in a second here. But thank God I grew up in an age where therapists were not predatory as much at this time, because I got the answer that I should have gotten. They told me, no, you're just anxious. You don't have any of those things. You're just anxious. You're just anxious. They didn't even prescribe me anything. They said, no, you're just anxious. You're just anxious. And that lasted a whole entire summer. I wasn't happy with the answers, so I would go to the next therapist and the next therapist and the next psychologist, right? And every time they would tell me I'm anxious, I would go to the next person. The reason I would go to the next person is I was hoping they would tell me something different than just anxiety. This carried into college. Now, I was actually prescribed, I forget what depression medication I was prescribed, but freshman year college, I continued to have these thoughts, and I took myself to the school psychologist or whatever, and they gave me some sort of depression medication. I remember taking it for a month, not liking how I felt, and threw all of it out. Thank God I did that as well. And yeah, that was really my journey. As my anxiety turned into just self-diagnosis after self-diagnosis, and it really affected my way of life. It affected me as a social person, making friends. Because I figured, like, man, there's something wrong with me. Who would want to be friends with me? It affected my confidence levels. It affected a lot of things in my life, and it became all-encompassing, all-consuming, and it became detrimental to the people around me because it was all I talked about with my mom. And man, I really feel bad for my dad because at that phase of life, the reason I thought I was bipolar is because my grandma is bipolar. And I can remember moments where I would tell my dad, you're bipolar. And I would start self-diagnosing my dad and saying that he has bipolar. And that's the reason why I have bipolar, is because my dad has bipolar. So I took a lot of that out on my dad, and I feel terrible in hindsight. And I dumped a lot emotionally on my mom. But thank God both of them loved me and still do obviously love me and saw that phase of my life through. And then eventually my anxiety got better. All right. And eventually it got better, and it got better. And I didn't really know why it got better. Now I do, but it got better when I started my business and I started consuming my thoughts with improving my business. And I had this mission and I had this goal I wanted to obtain and accomplish, and these people that I wanted to help. There was something outside of myself. And that's when I noticed, and I looked up, and it was multiple years later. And I was like, wow, I haven't felt anxious in a while. And I still have those thoughts pop up, what is wrong with me and things like that, but it's not detrimental anymore. I can acknowledge the thought and I can still function in my day, and it doesn't cripple me anymore. And that goes into perfectly what I learned. Okay, so there's 3 points that I wrote down here about anxiety. And some of them, just prepping you guys, some of them might be harsh. Some of them might be things that you don't want to hear, but they're messages that I think you may need to hear. So let's get into it, okay? Anxiety, or number one, all right, this is not a harsh point, the first one here, okay? The first one here, anxiety is not abnormal, okay? Anxiety is absolutely normal. Every single human being is going to feel anxiety, and if you don't feel anxiety, you are probably actually a psychopath if you don't feel anxiety. So every single person is going to feel anxiety. Okay, so if that's true, then why is it such a prevalent problem in our world? Well, we talked a lot about how the world functions. We talked a lot about the news. We talked a lot about all of the social media, all that stuff. But something that I think is really absolutely disgusting is the therapist culture and the coaching culture has become very predatory. Okay. There are coaches out there, self-proclaimed coaches that probably don't have any background or experience in helping people through mental illness at all. Right. And then you have therapists that do this as well, that will make people believe they have a problem when they don't have a problem, only to make money. And I couldn't think of a more disgusting way to make money than that. All right. And I think that is something that has absolutely infiltrated our culture. And I think a lot of it actually comes from this woke mindset type of culture, this woke mindset type of mentality, almost to the point where, and I see this a lot with Gen Z people, almost to the point where they think it's actually cool to have a problem, where people, and this is true, I've heard stories of this, people will actively search for a problem, because if they don't have a problem, that's not the cool thing. It's actually cooler to have a problem. It's cooler to have a mental illness. It's cooler to have a parent who molested you. It's cooler to have XYZ tragic event to happen in your life than to say that you don't have those things. And I think that's disgusting. And I think that comes from the predatory therapist community. I think it comes from the predatory coaching community. I think it comes from the predatory online social media community, where people will convince others they have a problem just so they can make a payday. Now, are all therapists like that? No. Are all coaches like that? No. But there definitely is a category of coaches that is causing and putting gas on the fire of that problem there. And I think it's absolutely disgusting. So getting back to your anxiety is normal. There is nothing wrong with you. And that was the big thing that I thought, that because I felt anxious, there was something wrong with me. And that's why I was constantly searching for answers, right? Anxiety is 100% normal. It's absolutely in your DNA, and it's a survival mechanism. That's what anxiety is. It's a survival mechanism. And we're going to talk about how you can actually use that as a superpower in just a second. But let's just prove that point, that it is a survival mechanism, right? Back in the day, right, caveman days, pre-true civilization days, we would feel anxious, right? We get back into the cave, we look around, we notice, wow, we're running low on food supply. Oh shit, they start feeling anxiety, and that anxiety it gives them energy, right? And direction and a compass. Hey, we need to go get food, right? We feel anxious because there's a threat. Oh shit, now I either got to fight this threat or I got to run from this threat, right? Anxiety is a protection mechanism. It's a survival instinct, right? That's why we have anxiety, right? So stop. If you're going through your day, this is the worst thing you can do, right? And I used to do this too. I used to wake up and say, oh man, I really hope I don't feel anxiety today. Let's just get through the day, not feeling any anxiety. And then once you feel the anxiety, then you go down the rabbit hole. You're like, I knew it. I knew I couldn't go through a day without feeling anxiety. What is wrong with me? And then you start kicking yourself. And then next thing you know, you just start spiraling. Okay. If you are trying to go through your day right now without feeling any anxiety, you are setting yourself up to fail. You are setting yourself up to fail. You have to associate that anxiety is a normal human emotion. And once you accept that, because that's step one, once you accept that anxiety is actually a normal human emotion, then you can learn how to actually utilize your anxiety as an advantage instead of a disadvantage. But that's the first thing you have to understand first. One, it's not cool to say you have a fucking problem, okay? It's not cool to say you have a problem, so stop searching for problems. That doesn't make you cooler. That doesn't make you more relatable. That doesn't give you higher social status. It makes you kind of a fucking weirdo, if I'm being honest, okay? And I can say that because I was that person searching for a fucking problem. And I was, if I had that version of myself in front of me, I would think that person's a fucking weirdo. Right? That version of me was weird. Why are you doing that? That's not helping you. That's not helping the people around you. It's not helping anybody. Okay? So get that out of your head. All right? It's not cool. All right? What is cool is understanding that it is a normal human emotion and learning how to make it a superpower. Okay? And that's going to go on to point number 2. Anxiety is actually a compass. And here's how you can actually make it a superpower. And here's how I harnessed it and now still to this day use it as a superpower. Okay. Anxiety is energy. That's what it is, right? Happiness is energy. Sadness is energy. Depression is energy. Anxiety is energy. Being surprised, all emotional feelings have an energy to it. And anxiety is a very, 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 very powerful energy source. It is an energy source that helped me build a lot of success. Okay. Built 7-figure companies, have done over 8 figures in sales. And a lot of that is stemmed from anxiety, right? Anxiety and fear kind of go hand in hand, right? And in the beginning, not to get too deep into my business journey, but I was really dead broke, didn't have any money. My parents worked really hard. They weren't the type of parents that could have like helped me out. I had to figure everything out on my own. And that caused a lot of anxiety. But that anxiety, 2 choices here. That anxiety could have crippled me and said, woe is me, or that anxiety could have drove me to do the work to solve the problem. And that's exactly what it did, right? So if you learn, if you learn how to harness it as a superpower, you can learn how to harness that energy and use it to put it into good, right? To change your physical state, to change your mental state, to change your spiritual state, to change your marriage, to change your business, whatever the problem is. Okay, so that's the first thing you have to understand is that anxiety is just energy. And that energy can either be used to perpetuate to make your anxiety worse, right? Spiraling, going down the rabbit hole, or that energy could be used to solve the problem. Okay, so that's the first thing you have to understand. The second thing you have to understand is anxiety is an indicator. It's a compass. It's something that points out your problems. When you feel anxious, it's not just, oh, I feel anxious, right? It's not just this random mystical thing that comes upon you for most people. Okay, there are real anxiety disorders out there, right? But, and this might rub some people the wrong way, majority of people don't actually have anxiety disorder. They're just feeling normal day-to-day anxiety and labeling it as an anxiety disorder. The percentage of people that actually have an anxiety disorder is very, very small. Okay. I know that's not what you want to hear. I know that rubs people the wrong way, but it's the truth. Okay. And if you can't accept that as fact, then you probably should turn this video off because nothing I'm going to say is actually going to solve your problem until you figure out that you don't have an anxiety disorder. You just have normal day-to-day anxiety that you've made worse because you're hyper-focusing on it. Okay, getting back to my point. Anxiety is a compass. Okay, you don't just feel anxiety because it's random and the mystical anxiety fairy said, hey, Chad's going to feel anxiety at 1 p.m. today. No, you feel anxiety because there's a reason. There's a problem, okay? You could feel anxiety. Let's say you feel anxiety because you're in a relationship that isn't serving you. Let's say that you feel anxiety because you're in a business that no longer serves you. Let's say you feel anxiety because you're in a job that no longer serves you, right? All these things are problems in your life, external, real problems in your life that are causing internal problems, anxiety within your body. Okay, and until you solve the external problem, the internal problem will not be solved, right? So anxiety is actually a superpower. It's actually helping you out. It's pointing out that there is an issue in your life and you have to identify what that problem is and then go and solve it. Okay, so stop thinking like, oh, I'm just feeling anxiety to feel anxiety. And another thing that a lot of you guys do is you know that there's a problem. You know that there's a problem outside of yourself. You know that you need to change jobs. You know that you need to have that hard conversation. You know that something needs to change. Only you know what that is. But the other problem here is that people will numb that. They'll run away from that. Okay, so one, they'll either not recognize it and they'll just say that they're an anxious person, or two, they will recognize it, but they would rather run away from the problem than solve the problem, and then they wonder why they're still anxious. It's because the longer that you prolong that problem, the worse the anxiety is going to get. The worse the anxiety is going to get. And once again, y'all, I'm speaking from experience here, right? I prolonged the problem a lot. That was one thing I did a lot. I would numb myself with different things, right? For example, I'm in the process of changing businesses. When I knew that I needed to change businesses, I would numb my problems with stimulants to get me through the day, to get me through the workday, right? There are times where I would numb pain on the weekends with alcohol. There are times where I would numb pain by consuming lots of content just to distract my brain and distract myself, right? There are lots of different ways that we can numb ourselves, but it's not serving you, okay? Temporarily it is, but long term, you're just going to feel more. Want to make sure my mic is working. That you're just going to have more and more anxiety. Now, I got a little bit off script here. Just want to make sure I am on point here. Yeah, so coming back and wrapping up point number 2, anxiety is a compass. It's going to point out your issues. The more that you run from those issues, hide from those issues, the longer it takes for you to address the problem, the more anxiety you're going to feel. Okay, the other point that I made is that you don't just feel anxious to feel anxious. There's a reason that you feel anxious. There is a problem in your life that needs to be solved. Now, some of these problems need to be solved entirely. Like, I'm going to use the relationship one as an example. Some of you probably do need to break up with the person. Majority of you, though, that's probably a small percentage. Majority of you, though, there's probably just a hard conversation that you need to have with that person. And once you have that hard conversation and you guys come to a conclusion, you probably will feel better. Okay? Now, continuing down, all right? So anxiety, we feel anxiety. We identify what is the problem, right? So we feel anxiety. Oh, cool, I feel anxiety. Great, well, hey, there's a problem that needs to be solved, right? Instead of saying, oh my God, I feel anxiety. It's the end of my day, or it's the end of the day now. Shit, I can't do anything else, right? That's the wrong way to react. The right way to react is I feel anxious. Hell yeah. I feel a little anxious. What's the problem? Boom, I identified the problem. Once you identify the problem, then you act first. Then you take action, regardless of having the perfect plan, regardless of knowing exactly what to say, regardless of knowing what your next step is, you take action. You act first. Okay, so that's point number 2. And moving on to the third and final point, and this is going to be the one that might ruffle some feathers. But we live in a very selfish society, a very me society. Look at my views, look at my likes, look at this, look at that, look at that. Everything becomes self-consumed, becomes self-absorbed. And when you couple that, a society that is looking inward, a society that is focused on me and me only, and you couple that with anxiety, it becomes a really big problem. And using myself as an example, I was selfish. I was selfish as fuck. Why was I selfish? All I cared about was me. All I cared about was my problems and answering the question, what is wrong with me? And as a result of that, there's collateral damage, right? It's not just you're messing yourself up and you're in your head and you're beating yourself up and you have all these problems. You bring other people along for the ride. At that time, I brought who's now my wife, but at the time was my girlfriend. I brought Caitlin along for the ride, and I would emotionally dump on her. My mom, I would emotionally dump on my mom and frustrate the heck out of her. And honestly, I would bully my dad. Yeah, I bullied my dad. Reason being, the reason I thought I had bipolar disorder is because when I looked it up, I found out it's genetic, and my grandma is bipolar. And then I started telling my dad that he's bipolar, and that's the reason why I was bipolar. And that definitely frustrated the shit out of him as well. And we got in a lot of fights over that. But all that stemmed from was me being selfish, me being self-absorbed and self-consumed with myself and my problems. And I say this in the nicest way possible, but you cannot be a contributing member of society, somebody who is moving the human race forward, somebody who is improving the lives of humanity when you're in this state, when you're only focused on you. It's selfish as fuck. And if you're in that, you got to snap out of it. And here's how I did. And I didn't do this strategically. This happened, this was the sequence of events. And now in hindsight, I realize what happened. I fell in love with fitness and entrepreneurship. More specifically, I started watching a guy named Christian Guzman, who you may or may not know. And I told myself that I wanted to become an entrepreneur and I wanted to become an online fitness coach. And I became obsessed with it. I became consumed with it. And next thing I know, I wasn't feeling anxious anymore. I wasn't focused on my problems, but I was starting to build something that is bigger than myself. I started to build a company that was going to help individuals get better at their health and fitness, to lose weight and to improve their lives. And I loved the process. I loved building the business. I was all in, all consumed by it, and my anxiety went away. And the reason my anxiety went away is because I wasn't focused on me anymore. I was focused on something bigger than me, something that can actually contribute, something that can actually help other individuals. And if you feel like you're stuck in this cycle, I challenge you, and it might be hard, but I challenge you to ask yourself, when is the last time you did something for somebody else? And I'm talking about something meaningful. I'm not talking about, begrudgingly doing an errand for your husband or for your wife, right? I'm talking about you went out of your way to do something. It was your decision, not somebody telling you to do something and you did it. It was your decision to go out of your way to help somebody else out. When was the last time you did that? And if you did have a recent time, I bet you it felt great. And I bet you it was a moment that your anxiety might have disappeared for a little bit. And if you haven't done it, it's now the time to do it. And this is the cure to getting rid of your anxiety, is you got to find what you're passionate about. You got to find, and I'm not talking about this, big esoteric thing. You don't have to become the next president of the United States. You don't have to solve world hunger. That's not what I'm talking about. It could be as simple as, I'm going to commit to being a better father. I'm going to commit to being a better mother. I'm going to commit to being a better entrepreneur. I'm going to commit to whatever. It could already be something that you do in your life. It could be your job, right? It could be anything that you already do in your life. You could choose to be better at it, or it could be something new. But it certainly doesn't have to be this grandiose thing in order for it to alleviate your anxiety. What it does have to do, though, is it does have to be selfless. And it does have to involve helping other individuals. So point number 3 is you need a mission, you need a purpose outside of yourself. All right, let's wrap this up, y'all. Let's wrap this up. I got a couple of points here. All right, point number 1 to wrap this up. And I mean this seriously, and I truly want you to reflect on this. Are you really going to let something as silly as anxiety hold you back from living the best life that you can? a life where you're truly building relationships, you're accomplishing goals, you're doing things that you can only imagine that you're going to do. You're truly living your best life. Are you going to let something as silly as anxiety hold you back from achieving that? Think about it. Anxiety, we can't touch it. We can't even see it. It's this intangible object. It's invisible. It's the same thing as saying that there's a ghost in my room right now. I can't see it. I can't prove that, right? That's the same thing. Anxiety is a ghost. It's something we can't see, right? And if we can't see it, is it even real? Right? That's how we tell if things are real in our life, is with our eyes, right? Most people, you hear a noise, right? You're in your house. It's at nighttime, right? You hear a noise from downstairs. You go to check it out. Why do you go down to check it out? You go down to check it out to see if it's real, right? You hear the noise. You think, holy shit, somebody's breaking into my house. You go down there because your eyes confirm that it's real or it's not real. Why don't we do the same thing with anxiety? Right? We can't see it. It's not a tangible object, and we are letting something that is intangible ruin our lives. So that's a question I want you to leave this call with, or leave this video with, is, are you really going to let something as silly, as fake as anxiety hold you back from accomplishing what you want to accomplish in your life? The last thing I want to say, y'all, it's not time to cope. It's time to act first. And here's what I mean by that. Cope, to me, sounds selfish. I'm coping. I'm soothing, right? That's more directed back at me. I'm focused on me. I am coping. I am soothing. No, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to act first, right? Act first, once again, is to take a step forward, even if you don't know the path in front of you. Is to take a step forward on blind faith that if you continue to move forward, regardless of having a perfect plan, regardless of having a perfect vision, that there is a better outcome as long as you keep taking the next step. And as long as you keep taking left foot, right foot, right foot, that eventually that path is going to lead you to something greater. I don't know if you're spiritual. I believe in God. I would consider myself a Christian, a new Christian, I would say past 12 months. But one thing that I'm definitely learning in Christianity is that God does have a plan for you. Now, God, he can't make decisions for you. At the end of the day, he's given you and I free will to make those decisions, but he will continue to show you signs of what path you are meant to go down. And I believe the same is true with anxiety. God doesn't want you to be anxious. God doesn't want you to be fearful, right? Those are the emotions of the devil. Those are the emotions of the individual or the thing or the spiritual being that is trying to tear you down, right? God wants you to lead with love. God wants you to be successful. God wants you to be abundant. But you can't be abundant, successful. You can't have those things if you're stuck. You can't have those things if you are stuck in your mind. Not in your heart, you're in your mind, but if you're stuck in your body and perpetuating with anxiety. The only way to get past anxiety is to figure out something greater beyond yourself. And that requires action. And that requires you to be the one to take the first step, to be the one to act first. So it's not time to cope. It's time to act first. And that's all I got for you guys today. Hopefully this was helpful. If you guys enjoyed this, you guys know what to do. The best way to repay is to hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend, maybe a thumbs up, maybe a comment if you feel compelled, if you feel that the value is there. If you feel that the value sucks, don't subscribe. Don't share it with a friend. Don't leave a thumbs up. Don't leave a comment. Only do those things if you truly feel that this was helpful. Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys as always, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.